Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about Berry Chapter 13, which covers eco-criticism. Eco-criticism is simply defined the study of the relationship between literature and the physical environment. The concept is straightforward and exactly what it sounds like. Eco-criticism explores how elements of literature capture the natural world around them and works to explain how the natural world shapes writing.
Unlike most of Barry's theories discussed so far, eco-criticism is still a new and emerging perspective. The movement still does not have a widely established set of assumptions, doctrines, or procedures. It began in the USA in the late 1980s and in the UK in the early 1990s. Eco-criticism, as it now exists in the United States, takes its major concepts from three 19th century American writers renowned for their celebration of nature, life force, and the wilderness: Ralph Waldo Emerson, Margaret Fuller, and Henry David Thoreau. The three were part of a famed group of New England writers and philosophers known as the Transcendentalists.
In England, eco-criticism has developed from the works of 18th century critic Jonathan Bate, but is as a whole less developed than American eco-criticism, perhaps because of a lack of strong cultural identification with nature and the wilderness frontier that America has with the West. This comparison between American and English eco-criticism is similar to the situation seen in Berry Chapter 9, between British cultural materialism and American New Historicism. The movements are clearly linked in their goals and aims, but differ in emphasis and literary ancestry. American eco-criticism is generally more celebratory in tone, while the British variant is more ominous and advisory.
The most fundamental concept of eco-critics is that they reject the notion that everything is socially or linguistically constructed. Instead, nature is its own creation, and it creates its own importance. The approach says that nature really exists, with no need for us to conceptualize or reduce its existence. We often see nature being presented simply as a theme or a setting in literature, a trope of little importance with little need for observation or appreciation beyond the superficial. Rather, eco-critics suggest that we treat nature as an entity all on its own, one which affects, influences, and ultimately shapes us. An easily understood example of this idea is aging. Barry says, quote, "I can point to my own balding head as evidence of the overarching grand narrative of nature which contains us all in the cycle of growth, maturity, and decay." The eco-critics point out the universality of nature. It affects us all across all levels of culture and society, and they argue it should therefore be treated as an overarching feature of our literature as well.
Berry outlines the four major areas of the outdoor environment. These categories of the outdoor environment range from pure nature in Area 1 to just culture in Area 4. Area 1 is considered the wilderness, and an example of Area 1 is the ocean. Area 2 is considered the scenic sublime, and an example of this is forests. Area 3 is considered the countryside, and an example of this is the woods. Area 4 is considered the domestic picturesque, and an example of this is a garden. Even the wilderness, which is called pure nature, is now affected by global warming, so all the areas are also affected by culture. Area 1 is considered pure culture, Area 2 is in between culture and nature, Area 3 is in between culture and nature, and Area 4 is considered culture. Different genres of writing focus on different areas.
A eco-critical approach takes the environment and its subjects and brings it to the forefront of critical reading. Barry describes this process as bringing the outer to the inner. He notes that the most critical feature of this approach is to not privilege the inner works of psychology or character over that of the environment and the features of nature. This is not a reductive move, but but rather a perspective which adds additional depth and complexities to our literary works.
Pathetic fallacy is a term coined by the Victorian art critic John Ruskin. Ruskin believed the pathetic fallacy is the instinctive tendency to see our emotions reflected in our environment. Essentially, the pathetic fallacy reinforces the concept that humans believe everything is centered around us. Barry provides us with an example showing how we project human attributes onto natural elements. Barry's example is the cruel sea, because cruel is a human attribute and the sea is natural element. The sea cannot truly be cruel. We see this in literature all the time. The Anthropocene, also known as the Human Age, is the time period in the first 2 decades of the new millennium. It is characterized by humans' negative impact on the environment. Humans have altered the composition of the strata. Humans are adding radioactive elements to the strata through nuclear testing, creating plastic pollution, causing the sea levels to rise by melting the ice caps, and so much more. Much of our impact on the strata has to do with global warming. The impact of humans on the environment also impacts the way we read literature.
The work of eco-critics is boiled down to a few key points. First of all, they read from an ecocentric point of view, with special attention to the representation of the natural world. They apply ecological themes such as growth, energy, balance, symbiosis, and sustainability to things other than nature. The emphasis is put on ecological writers and factual pieces. Lastly, they turn away from the social constructivism and the linguistic determinism of dominant literary theories. Instead, they emphasize meticulous observation, ethical responsibility, and the world beyond ourselves.
We also have some Barry Chapter 13 discussion questions. What is the value to approaching literature from an eco-critical point of view? Think of your favorite piece of literature. How can you apply the eco-critical view to this piece? In thinking about the 4 outdoor environments, how do you think nature and culture are interrelated? In what ways do they clash? And in what ways do they coexist? Think of specific examples. How does literature influence our understanding of nature? Talk about specific examples of where nature is a major part of the work. Additionally, we have some Embassy Town discussion questions. What do you think about the opening of chapter 31, where Eva states, "Poor Skyle," on page 338? What is the significance of her stating this? Why is this situation presented in this manner? How might viewing Embassy Town through an eco-critical lens change the way the book is understood? What is the role of community in the end of the book? How does it drive the plot? Embassy Town is full of esoteric, made-up language and words. Pick a word you might not understand or that you think is critical to understanding a specific scene or the book at large. Why did you pick this word? What does it mean? Why is it important to understand?